Boston immediately recognized the mismatch, sealed her defender, and Clark threaded a perfect pass for an easy bucket. It was the kind of chemistry coaches dream about. Seattle wasn't backing down either. Skylar Diggins made it clear she came to play, slicing through the defense with surgical precision. But Clark responded again, not with a deep three or flashy move, but with hustle. She stripped the ball loose, sprinted in transition, and finished at the rim. It was grit over glamour, and every time Seattle scored, Indiana answered with poise. Clark began finding Boston again and again, cutting, rolling, and running the floor. The rhythm wasn't about one superstar anymore, it was about the system working. The Fever weren't just reacting, they were dictating the pace. And it all started with Caitlin letting the game come to her. A message sent early. After Clark's sudden fall, it wasn't just her teammates who responded. It was the entire Fever system. Aliyah Boston immediately ramped up her presence in the paint, executing pick and rolls with surgical precision. When Seattle tried to trap Clark up top, she calmly read the pressure and threaded passes through the chaos. But this game quickly revealed it wasn't going to be a solo showcase. The Fever were leaning into collective offense, and Boston became the anchor. Every time the Storm threatened to close the gap, Indiana answered not with isolation plays, but with ball movement, screens, and relentless rebounding. Even Skylar Diggins' sharp drives couldn't shake the Fever's rhythm. Meanwhile, Kelsey Mitchell found her groove from deep, giving Indiana perimeter firepower to match Boston's inside dominance. The message was simple but loud. Indiana wasn't a one-player act, and when Clark got back on her feet, she didn't rush to retake the spotlight. Instead, she doubled down on facilitating, keeping the ball moving and trusting her team to finish. That balance of poise and unselfishness became the tone for the rest of the night. Steady, dangerous, and increasingly hard to stop. Something bigger than a highlight reel was building. Seattle fights back, but Indiana answers. Seattle wasn't going to roll over. Easy McBeggar and Neke Ogwumike started grinding for points in the paint, pushing Indiana's defense to react quickly. Skylar Diggins dug deep into her bag of tricks, using spin moves, misdirection, and bounce passes to keep the Storm in striking range. The pace escalated, but Indiana held their nerve. Mitchell responded with a transition three that quieted the momentum, while Boston continued to feast on mismatches. Each time Seattle threatened to run, Indiana delivered a counterpunch. Clark found Lexi Hull in the corner for a knockdown three, then followed up by initiating a slick two-woman game with Boston. It was basketball in its purest form, teamwork over hero ball. And as the second quarter wore on, it was clear Indiana was asserting more than just scoreboard control. They were controlling tempo, imposing their structure, and doing it without needing Clark to carry the offensive load. That fall earlier, it turned out to be a turning point, not for Caitlin to become the hero, but for the Fever to reveal just how dangerous they were when they played united. And heading into halftime, the Storm looked frustrated, outmaneuvered, and outpaced. Clark's comeback wasn't flashy, it was precise. As the second half opened, Caitlin Clark didn't need to put on a show, she needed to make the right plays. And that's exactly what she did. Early in the third quarter, she took Erica Wheeler one-on-one, delivering a silky behind-the-back dribble into a smooth finish at the rim. No over-the-top celebration, no forced plays, just calm execution. Then, like a quarterback reading the field, she found Aliyah Boston leaking out in transition and fired a full-court pass that led to another easy score. But it wasn't just her offense that mattered. It was her timing. Clark knew when to step in and when to step aside. Kelsey Mitchell stayed hot, burying tough mid-range jumpers and knocking down deep threes. Boston dominated in the paint, reaching the 20-point mark with pure physicality. Meanwhile, Seattle continued to rely on Diggins, but it was clear her heroic efforts were getting heavier. Clark, still a step slower than her norm, wasn't looking for revenge, she was looking for control. And through smart decisions, clean reads, and timely assists, she gave her team exactly that. This wasn't a comeback filled with fireworks, it was built on IQ, rhythm, and trust. And it worked. The Fever take full command. By the end of the third quarter, the Fever had done more than regain control. They had flipped the game into their hands entirely. Indiana's lead ballooned to double digits as Mitchell and Boston played their two-woman game to near perfection. Boston spun around defenders with soft hooks and muscled in finishes through contact. Mitchell punished every defensive misstep, drilling a step-back three that seemed to break Seattle's spirit. Clark remained the team's compass, never forcing, always guiding. She absorbed pressure from defenders and converted it into space for her teammates. Even when Seattle closed the gap with a Diggins three-pointer, Clark came right back with a signature outlet pass, hitting Boston in stride for another basket. Indiana's ball movement reached a different level, with 5 players touching the ball on most possessions before finding the open shooter. Lexi Hull capitalized from deep. Dantas added second-chance points off offensive rebounds. Every player in a Fever jersey was locked in. The scoreboard showed it, and the body language of both teams confirmed it. With each possession, the Storm grew more frantic and the Fever grew more focused. By the buzzer, Indiana had taken a commanding 17-point lead and weren't looking back. Clark's mid-range magic and Hull's breakout. As the fourth quarter began, Clark made a simple but devastating move. She came off a screen, took 2 hard dribbles, and pulled up for a mid-range jumper. It dropped with ease, and with it came a message. She was still here. Seattle tried to respond. Gabby Williams hit a tough turnaround over Sophie Cunningham, and Nneka Ogwumike picked off a lazy pass to spark a transition bucket. But every Seattle highlight was matched by Indiana's poise. Clark grabbed a rebound, scanned the floor, and rifled an outlet pass up court to Lexi Hull, who faked out her defender and calmly finished at the rim. That connection wasn't just pretty, it was devastating in its simplicity. Indiana wasn't relying on Clark to go 1-on-5, they were using her vision to dismantle defenses. And Hull, she took full advantage. Whether spotting up or moving without the ball, she found open lanes and knocked down shots with confidence. As Seattle scrambled, Indiana slowed the game just enough to stay in control. The Fever's play wasn't desperate, it was surgical. Every shot, every cut, every extra pass chipped away at Seattle's resolve. And through it all, Clark's fingerprints were everywhere. Quiet, smart, effective. Mitchell puts it away in style. When the Storm began flirting with a late run, Kelsey Mitchell slammed the door shut. After a few patient possessions, she used a slick step back to bury a deep three over her defender. The shot hit nothing but net, and the crowd erupted. Seattle, hoping to crawl back into the game, looked stunned. That one shot didn't just stop the bleeding. It turned the momentum off like a faucet. Mitchell wasn't finished. With the shot clock ticking down again, she pulled up for another jumper, this time with the defender in her face. Same result, clean bucket. Meanwhile, Boston went outside her comfort zone, catching the ball at the three-point line. But instead of hesitating, she attacked, drove to the rim, and finished with authority. Indiana wasn't just surviving, they were thriving, showing a completeness they hadn't always displayed. Clark, watching the clock and the defense, stayed composed, moving the ball swiftly and only taking what was given. Her leadership in those final moments wasn't loud, but it was commanding. With every touch, she calmed the Storm and gave Indiana exactly what they needed to put this game to bed. Clarity, confidence, and clock control. A final touch of brilliance. In the closing minutes, the Fever refused to coast. After a smart defensive switch caused confusion in Seattle's rotation, Clark spotted Boston unguarded near the rim. One bounce pass, one soft jumper, and the game was essentially sealed. That bucket gave Boston her 30th point of the night and symbolized what this night was really about. Team over spotlight. Yes, Clark had highlights. Yes, Mitchell dazzled. But Boston's steady dominance was the thread that held it all together. Seattle tried to fight back, but their energy was clearly drained. A left-hand floater from Diggins and a late three from Wheeler padded the score, but the gap was too wide. Indiana's bench rose to its feet in anticipation. The fans knew it too. This wasn't just another win. It was a win that showcased the team's full potential, and it happened on a night when Clark got knocked to the ground. That fall? It didn't define her. What came after? The calm, the playmaking, the trust. That's what mattered. This wasn't about revenge. It was about response. And Indiana's response showed they're not just building a team around Caitlin Clark, they're building a real contender. The fall that sparked a statement. Caitlin Clark may have been the headline going into the game, but the team that walked off the court belonged to Indiana. Her hard fall in the first quarter could have shifted the game's tone in the wrong direction. Tentativeness, panic, isolation play. But it didn't. Instead, it sparked the Fever's most balanced, assertive performance of the season. Mitchell led with scoring, Boston dominated with presence, and Clark orchestrated with control. What emerged wasn't a rescue mission by one superstar. It was a masterclass in how to win as a unit. When the Storm got physical, Indiana got smart. When the crowd held its breath after Clark's crash, the team exhaled for her and got to work. And when Seattle made their last push in the final quarter, Indiana didn't blink. They tightened the screws, they played through options, they trusted the system. This game won't be remembered because Clark got hit, it'll be remembered because of how she and her teammates got back up. That moment under the basket was the spark. Everything that followed was the fire. And for the Indiana Fever, that fire just might burn brighter than anyone expected.